Ecuador's military now deployed to neighborhoods.
¿Qué pasan por estas calles?
Estamos en un estado de guerra y no podemos ceder ante estos grupos terroristas.
A month ago, not just Ecuador, but the whole world bore witness to the dark reality that Ecuador has been living through. Violence, fear, and chaos spread throughout the country, and everything was becoming uncertain. But just when things seemed bleakest, President Daniel Noboa stepped in and declared a state of war, authorizing police and military to take the necessary action needed to be able to face off against incoming threats. Now, a month later, let's take a look at the results of the actions taken by the current government, as well as talk about the most important things you need to know if you're planning to visit Ecuador. Then at the end, I'll give my thoughts as an Ecuadorian on the Ecuador crisis thus far. So first, these are the results of the actions that have been taken by the current government. There have been over 78,000 police operations, 46,809.61 kilograms of drugs have been confiscated, 6,341 people have been captured, with 241 of them being due to terrorism. 110 police operations have been done against terrorist groups. 6 terrorists have been neutralized. 34 people deprived of liberty have been recaptured. 1,991 firearms have been confiscated. 2,909 edged weapons have been seized. 1,090 weapon feeders have been confiscated. 28 vessels or boats have been seized. $168,160.14 have been confiscated. 9,831 explosives have been confiscated. 979 vehicles have been recovered. 115,885 ammunition has been seized. 31,375 gallons of gas have been seized. 766 motorcycles have been recovered, and 2,837 communication equipments have been confiscated. In addition, the amount of daily violent deaths in Ecuador were reduced from 28 to just 6 per day, according to the Minister of Government and Interior, Monica Palencia. This information is accurate up until February 7th, 2024, with data being updated on the website comunicacion.gov.ec. Wow, the numbers certainly do paint quite the interesting picture, don't they? But those are part of my personal thoughts, and we'll talk about that in a bit. If you're someone who's planning on visiting Ecuador or living in Ecuador anytime soon, then it's important that you know the following. Starting with the border update, for the duration of the internal armed conflict in Ecuador, foreigners who wish to enter the country through the land borders with Peru and Colombia must present a criminal record certificate. According to the Ecuadorian government, the reason for this is to prevent and control the entry of individuals belonging to terrorist organizations, organized crime, or that constitute a threat or risk to the public security and structure of the state. The certificate must record the criminal record of the last 5 years. And a very important thing to note is that the criminal record documents required by Ecuador must be apostilled. In other words, the authenticity of the signature must be certified. In addition, they must be in Spanish. On screen, I will also leave information that specifies those who don't have to present the certificate. Next, we have the implementation of the traffic light curfew system, which started on January 23rd. The system works like this. Cities that are marked as red or high level in the traffic light system have a curfew from 12 a.m. until 5 a.m. There are currently 38 cantons that have been classified as high level. Cities that are marked as yellow or medium in the traffic light system have a curfew from 2 a.m. until 5 a.m. There are currently 23 cantons that have been classified as medium level. And cities that are marked as green or low level in the traffic light system no longer have a curfew. There are currently 160 cantons that have been classified as low level. This traffic light system is important to keep in mind, especially with Carnaval around the corner, because even though the country has been authorized to allow the celebration of Carnaval, the cities with medium and high levels of curfew must still abide by the curfew and be at home at their scheduled times. There is one more thing I'd like to note in regards to the traffic light curfew system, in regards to whether you should or shouldn't visit Ecuador. But it is a personal thought, so I'll leave that for later on. The last thing to note in regards to the curfew overall is that it will continue to be enacted until March 8th, 2024, unless the president decides to extend it one more month, which is the maximum amount of time he can extend the curfew and the state of emergency. As for the energy crisis that Ecuador was going through the last quarter of 2023, the rationing of power is no longer necessary due to the increased rainfall that Ecuador has been receiving. There doesn't seem to be any news articles, at least that I could find, that indicate this to be the case. And the last article written about the energy crisis states that rationing was set to restart on January 15th, but that has not happened. Adding to the talks about rain, we have to talk about the situation with El Nino. According to the Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, INAMI, it indicates that high-intensity rains will continue in much of the country until February 11th. These conditions are due to the high sea temperature brought on by the El Nino phenomenon. This will cause heavy rainfall in the littoral region, especially in the provinces of Guayas, Los Rios, Santo Domingo, and Manabí. In the Interandina region, Pichincha, Cotopaxi, and Bolivar will have high-intensity rains, while in the Amazon, there will be some areas of Sucumbíos, Napo, Orellana, and Pastaza affected by high-intensity rains. In the provinces of the Central Highlands, such as Tungurahua, Chimborazo, Cañar, and Azuay, there will be low levels of rainfall. A similar report was posted in the dates prior, from February 4th to the 6th, so there is a possibility that this will continue until the El Nino phenomenon runs its course. And finally, we have the situation with raising the IVA, or value-added tax, in Ecuador. There are two things you mainly need to know. The first being that the increase will be from 12 to 15%. The second is that the reasoning behind it is to be able to continue to face the internal armed conflict, or the crisis as we know it, in Ecuador. Keep in mind though that the raise has not been implemented yet, as it was proposed to be implemented around March, and there are many things that have been discussed in regards to the raise in VAT. But as it stands, it is more than likely to happen and be in effect for as long as Daniel Noboa is president of Ecuador. So my personal thoughts on the crisis as an Ecuadorian boil down to three main talking points. But they're all linked to the most important thing of them all. And it's the fact that this crisis isn't something that happened overnight. Remember when earlier I mentioned the picture that the data painted? You don't think that all those things just happened to magically appear when President Daniel Noboa decided to execute his safety plan, do you? No, we've been plagued by terrorists for a long time now, and it's only now that they're being acknowledged and handled as such. That's why the first main talking point is of course safety, because it's been a long time since Ecuadorians have truly felt safe. Sure, tourist attractions, 1 month or less visits, safe cities, those things are always going to be safe. But the Ecuadorian reality just isn't like that. First, we have extortion in the form of vacunaciones. I've talked about this before, but vacunaciones are just the fancy name that extortionists give to the term extortion. Then we have to worry every time we go out because our phones could get robbed. It seems like such a trivial thing, but being held at gun or knife point does not sound like fun. And it's not just an Ecuadorian concern, because my good buddy Don just talked about that in his most recent TAT video.
The kind of crime that bothers me is here in this neighborhood that I'm in here in Mesa, I can go out and go for a walk and not even have to think about somebody sneaking up behind me and sticking me in the back with a knife or my cell phone. Petty crime is a major nuisance. I know very few people that have not been a victim of petty crime in Ecuador.
And of course you'd assume that you'd feel a little bit safer since there are police in the country. But that's not actually the case, because for a long time, the police and the military just couldn't take action. They were restricted by the rule that they had to be acted upon first before they could take action. But of course there are some who just didn't want to put themselves at risk, and others who are probably in cahoots with the criminal. But if we sit here and talk about exceptions, we'll be here all day. And in regards to whether I think you should visit Ecuador or not due to safety, I want to refer back to the traffic light system and the reason for its implementation. The reason the traffic light system was implemented was due to the president wanting to reactivate the economy, since the longer curfew was making it difficult for businesses in Ecuador to survive. As such, with the traffic light system, the government, at least in some way, deems certain areas to be safe enough to conduct business. Consequently, another way you could look at this is that if it's safe enough to do business, then there's a higher chance of safety in that canton or city, making it assumedly safe to visit. But remember, higher does not mean guaranteed, but it's certainly better than assuming all of Ecuador is just flat out dangerous, when that's actually not the case, especially with so many military ensuring things stay safe. So if you're scheduled to visit, take a good look at the places that are marked as red or high-level curfew, and if the city you want to visit is there, then you may want to reconsider visiting or be ready to be as cautious as possible while you're there. Now my second talking point is almost the same as what I said in my 1-week update to the crisis video. I personally think that Daniel Noboa is doing an excellent job, but I'm really worried as to what's going to happen when the state of emergency and the state of war end. In other words, what if the smarter and higher ranked terrorists are planning an attack as soon as the state of emergency and the state of war end? Oof, it's scary stuff to think about, but let's hope there's already a plan in place for that being cooked behind the scenes. And my final talking point is unfortunately the wildest of wild cards that you could possibly imagine. And it's Ecuadorians themselves. Take it from me, who is both an Ecuadorian and who has socialized with Ecuadorians the whole time I've been here. People are truly happy with very little. But that's also because people get very little or nothing at all to begin with. Just look at how far people went to defend the person who gave them hospitals and highways, but left them with unfinished schools all around the country. Heck, I'm not even gonna lie, I was among the people who were very happy with the hospitals and the highways because they genuinely sound like and are very good things. And really, I didn't and still don't care who made them, because they still are a big plus to the country. But in that time, I was happy with what was made because I had no idea how much was taken for how little we were given. All this to say that the reason why Ecuadorians are the biggest wild card here is because if Ecuadorians manage to be swayed by the wrong people, then it's all over. Jesse from Fall Off the Map said it himself.
If violence increases because of this operation against the mafias, against the cartels, then there will be a tendency for the Ecuadorian population to go, hey, we want to go back to the good old days when we weren't fighting the cartels. We want to go back to a government that made us feel safer. Now the cartels are probably going to commit some horrific acts of violence in order to try to get a more friendly or sponsored by them president into power so that they can go back to business as usual.
Honestly, I'm afraid that people won't be able to take the insecurity that might come after the state of emergency and after the state of war. I'm worried that that fear will guide public opinion towards another savior who's willing to do less than ideal things to maintain the peace. Or, in other words, Ecuadorians' own fear and the inability to see past the current crisis will be the shackles that bind us to mediocrity. And in the end, nothing is guaranteed. But I really do hope that the crisis ends the best way possible so that Ecuador, with all its beauty and potential, can be the country that it truly deserves to be.